In the Reins, a novel. Written by Kade. Narrated by Amanda Lamb. Prologue. The anger came later as I drove wildly, blindly, furiously down the expressway, going 90 in a 70. My hot tears pooled at the corner of my eyes before overflowing into rivers streaming out across my mascara-stained cheeks. The painted pavement lines streaked and blurred across the road before me. It wasn't Michael that had me in a rage. It was my life. I found myself assessing the last 28 years of it, and I couldn't remember a time when I felt happy, complete. I strained my aching mind, searching its recesses for something that could make me feel whole. It wasn't men. It certainly wasn't being engaged to a dream man, as my friends had called him. It wasn't my career, although I'd always wanted to be a writer. It wasn't moving away from home. It wasn't living in another state or being in the big city. I scoured my mind for some trace of anything that really, really made me happy. Blank. Was I having a pre-midlife crisis? I nodded to myself. Probably. The researcher in me temporarily cast aside. I didn't even know where I was wildly driving to, just far away from there and from him. That was all I knew. The turn of events replayed in my mind. I gripped the wheel tighter and pressed the pedal harder. Chapter 1. I'm through, and I'm leaving, I said flatly. Where do you think you're going? Michael countered, catching me by the crook of my arm, eyeing the pulled-out, empty drawers of my dresser. I found this, I replied, emotionless, wiggling myself out of his grasp and tossing the piece of crumpled paper I had been clutching onto the hardwood floor beside his shiny, Prada-wielding feet. I delivered this discourse with a certain calm, more so than I imagined I would have, after pacing our studio apartment and waiting for him to come home. I always knew something wasn't quite right between us. There never was that fire in our relationship that lit me up and made it impossible for me to live without his touch. I believed that sort of burning desire between a man and woman was possible all my life. I was disappointed to the point of paralysis to not have found that with the man I intended to marry. All this time, and I never did anything about it. Until now. What is this? He retorted, with a grunt, bending down to retrieve the ball of shame from the floor. I watched his eyebrows crease and form a V as he reread the delicate handwriting that wasn't my own. He didn't look at me. I didn't want him to. We weren't meant to be, I said, glazing my embarrassment at finally acknowledging it. I placed my 2-carat pillow-cut engagement ring, reflecting brilliance in the overhead lighting, on the nightstand. Without remorse, I turned my back to him and lifted my bags off the plush king-size bed that we'd never share again. Luckily, I didn't have much to pack. I'd made a habit of living life light. I decided in college that I didn't want material things to weigh me down. I was committed to investing in the expansion of my mind rather than my possessions. Never did I think that, in the end, it would be a person who kept me tied down. In this moment, though, I felt surprisingly free, surprisingly not angry, and surprisingly glad that fate had found a way for me to get out of this lackluster relationship. Fate always did that for me. It always extracted something from my life and replaced it with another choice to make before I allowed myself to circle the ring, prepared for the emotional beat-up. I'd known that I didn't want to be with Michael for a long time. I just kept hoping that something or someone would change. It became glaringly obvious. I had to be that change. Devin, let's talk about this, he said, his lovely brown eyes showing only a hint of conscience. I'd always hated that about him. He could never fully admit that he was in the wrong. He was able to justify his actions every single time, at least in his own mind, and I'd forgive him every time. He always took my breath away, looking at me, seducing me with those lovely brown eyes. Mud. His eyes are the color of mud. Michael, don't. Neither of us wants this. I feel it. I know you do too. Let's not fight. Not tonight. Not anymore. Just let me go. I didn't beg or plea. This was a matter of fact. Where will you go, Devin? He sneered. I don't know. I shut the door behind me gently, knowing it was the last time I would walk through it. I sighed and took my first step toward change. Chapter 2. Wake up! Lost in thought, I failed to acknowledge the sea of red lights in front of me because I was reliving the past, pedal forced flat, physically going forward but mentally going backwards, excelling my mind in rewind. Brake lights flashed from every direction, and in the distance, an 18-wheeler veered across all 3 lanes of the expressway. I snapped out of my head into action just in time to jerk the steering wheel to the right off the blacktop, and into the dirt patch on the side of the road. I missed the car ahead of me by millimeters. I threw my whole self against the steering wheel, my shoulders slumped, tears burning the corners of my eyes, searching for breath. My stomach a nervous knot. What the heck, Devin? You have a breakup on your hands, not a death wish. Finding the will to gather myself, I wiped my puffy eyes with the heel of my hand, staining the cuffs of my white shirt with mascara, and looked up. There it was. Fate. Again. It was knocking on my door, ringing my doorbell. Ding, ding, ding. There I sat. Black streaked down my face, spun out on the side of the road, dust still settling around my car, focusing on what sprawled out in front of me. Shock and awe took hold as I let my vision adjust through the dirty windshield. There before me, several horses were grazing in a lush meadow speckled with lavender clover, just a yard or 2 from the fence in front of me. A few of them took notice and picked up their heads, ears pricked forward, contemplating my little car idle on the side of the road. My mind burst awake in an instant. I felt alive in a way that I hadn't felt in years, having run my car off the side of the road, avoiding a freak accident, and now staring out into a field of horses. Suddenly, I was aware. I was back in my apartment in the city, rereading my brainstorming journals, taking note of the millionth time I'd scrawled, "I will have a horse again," across the top of one of my writing projects. I was conscious of all the times I'd aimlessly doodled a horse on pieces of scrap paper while I was on the phone with a friend from back home, sipping red wine in the wee summer night hours. I was a child again, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, playing with model horses in the bathtub, taking riding lessons at the local farm, joining a 4-H club, begging my parents for a horse for years, and then, shockingly, receiving one for my birthday. Yes, my parents provided the perfect childhood mount. It was fate. The universe, my universe, had spoken and heaved me in front of this random horse pasture in my desperate, frantic, altered life reevaluation state. I reflected back to being a teenager, lost among my peers, and in the midst of my parents' divorce, feeling completely incomplete, until I was out of the barn, riding my horse. My childhood horse silenced my doubt, that inner nagging voice, and lifted me out of the darkness for so many of my adolescent years. She taught me how to succeed, and gave me my first taste of success in our small town show ring. It occurred to me that when I sold cricket to move to the city, I lost part of myself, a part of me that I desperately missed, but locked deep down inside of me. I thought I wanted a career in the city writing fabulous articles for fabulous magazines. In the end, I had chosen to live where horses could not have a place in the feature story. In preparation for my new life, I had boxed up every trophy, ribbon, and picture, leaving cricket packed away from my heart in a basement back home. I walked with a blind eye past horses for hire in the park. I refused to watch movies about horses. I found myself welling with tears when I watched the Pegasus leap out and unfold its wings at the beginning of the DVDs I rented. I cried when I went to the Belmont Stakes and heard the roar of hooves down the racetrack. Horses made me happy. Complete. Then and there, in the middle of some state, in a wild state of being, I vowed I would own a horse again. With a new sense of direction, I steered my car back on the highway, gingerly maneuvered gaps in the traffic jam, boldly crossed the grassy median, and took the first exit south. Chapter 3. The choice to steer south set off a whirlwind of activity when I crossed the state line 2 months ago. First, I rented a small apartment and set up my office in the spare room. Being a writer afforded me great freedom. I cherished that I could write from anywhere and whenever inspiration struck me. My editor was only a speed dial away. I felt fortunate that I had a modest savings account that I hadn't told Michael about to fall back on, as my last project had been a moderate success. I had written a vegetarian diet cookbook, a companion piece to an article of mine that had been published in Organic Lifestyle magazine. I knew I could sustain my dream horse and myself for a decent amount of time until my next assignment came in. Once I was settled into a space of my own, I did what I do best. A writer knows how to research. So, I researched. I researched horse breeds and bloodlines on every equine website I could find. I watched lessons from top horse trainers and read every horse magazine under the sun. I frequented local tack shops, then I bought everything I knew I would need for my future horse online. You name it, I did it. I discovered a favorite website, www.heavenscenthorse.com, and scoured through the sale ads, looking for something that would strike me. Time and time again, I found myself returning to the breed of my youth, the Western Pleasure Prospect. I sorted through what felt like thousands upon thousands of online ads for quarter horses, but in the end, it was the flair of the color breeds that I really loved. I found myself typing Palomino and Paint into the equine search engines. I knew fate would guide me again. I knew it was just a matter of time before fate would lead me to the right horse at the right time. I researched incessantly that second month, soaking everything in, putting everything I had out there, and nothing spoke to me. I did this for hours upon hours, day after day, staying up way too late and waking up way too early. I was a woman obsessed. I was so consumed that I didn't have time to think of Michael or the male species in general, and I was grateful for that. One particular morning, I swore off the whole empty search and sat down at my laptop with a steaming cup of aromatic coffee to work on an article I had been assigned for a women's magazine about eating organic. I was typing mid-sentence when one of my search engine alerts popped up, telling me new horses had been added to heavenscenthorse.com that matched my criteria. I minimized the bubble and sat back. It had been a few days since any new horse ads had been posted to the site. I had browsed every horse within a 3-state radius and nothing had appealed to me. I took a long sip of my oversized coffee mug, swallowed, and inhaled deeply. Could this be it? I had plunged myself into the world of horses for the past 2 months and nothing had inspired me, especially not the fact that the value of a finished, well-trained horse had almost doubled in price since the days of my childhood. So much had changed. My mind went into overdrive and I started to reason with myself, debating the pros and cons of being in the market for a horse right now. It was all so different, and my research told me that I had so much to learn. This business of horses seemed foreign to me now that I was an adult. from the price of a good horse to the way I noticed people were riding. Things had evolved while I'd been busy building my life in the city. With a roll of my eyes and a defiant grunt, I shoved those thoughts to the back of my head and told the negative voices to quiet down. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't going to talk myself out of this. I gulped the last of my light roast, a nice caffeine buzz settling in, and leaned forward, directing the mouse to the link in my inbox. The click took me to a single result. I'd had better days with nearly 50 overpriced horse pictures staring back at me, but today, this one ad took me by surprise. It didn't feature a picture and only had a solitary line of text. It read, "Cute paint with a great personality, $1,800, must sell." No way. The horses I had been looking at were all priced well over $7,500. For a mere $1,800, my assumption was that this horse must be scary looking or ill or half dead or worse. Then I looked at the address. It was stabled only 20 minutes from my apartment. Intrigued, I read further, and below the ad, it listed bloodlines. Because of my diligent research, I recognized the quality immediately. I was astonished at the beyond reasonable price on this animal. There had to be something wrong with it. I tilted my head in contemplation and looked out the window. Or could this be fate calling? I picked up my cell and dialed the number. About the author. Carly Kade is an Arizona-based author and enjoys competitively showing her registered paint horse. In her free time, Carly works on her next novel, reads voraciously, spends time with her husband and 2 adopted dogs, and loves exploring the great outdoors. Feeling social? Join the herd and connect with Carly Kade Creative on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. Can't wait to find out what happens next for McKinnon and Devin? Visit Carly's blog at carlykadecreative.com for sequel sneak peeks, updates, and release info. Reviews are golden. If you enjoyed this book, please leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. Your readership and support is greatly appreciated. The end.